Kira Chen pressed her face against the window of the transport ship as the Centauri Academic Collective came into view. The space station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in the darkness, its walls glowing with soft blue light. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years, ever since Earth announced the first human exchange program with alien schools. Her hands trembled a little as she gathered her things. She was 17 years old, and about to become the first human student at the most important school in the galaxy. The other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. She felt like a cave person about to attend a university. The docking bay was huge and filled with strange smells. Kira stepped off the ship and immediately felt different from everyone around her. The aliens moved like dancers, their steps light and careful. They spoke in whispers that sounded like music. Some had skin that looked like colored glass. Others had bodies covered in geometric patterns, and a few had tentacles instead of hair that swayed gently around their heads. A tall alien with crystal-like skin approached her. His name was Dean Veltar, and he was the head of the school. His voice was soft and musical when he spoke. "Welcome, young human. We are honored to have you join our institution." His words were polite, but Kira noticed he kept a careful distance from her. "Please follow me. We must discuss some important matters before you begin your studies." As they walked through the station, other students stopped to stare at Kira. She heard whispers in languages she did not understand, but their tone made her uncomfortable. Some pointed at her with expressions of curiosity, mixed with something that looked like fear or disgust. The hallways were beautiful but strange. Everything was made from materials that seemed to glow from within. The walls curved in ways that hurt her eyes to look at, following alien ideas of architecture. The air smelled clean but artificial, and it felt too thin in her lungs. Dean Veltar led her to a small office with furniture that looked more like art than something to sit on. He gestured for her to take a seat, but the chair was clearly not made for humans. It was too small and felt fragile under her weight. She sat carefully, afraid she might break it. "Kira Chen from Earth," the dean began, reading from a glowing tablet. "Excellent academic scores, multiple language certifications, and recommendations from your planet's finest educators." He paused and looked at her directly. "However, we must address the elephant in the room, as your people say." Kira's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "You come from what we classify as a death world," the dean continued. "Your planet Earth has gravity that would crush most of our students. Your atmosphere contains dangerous levels of oxygen. Your weather includes violent storms that could destroy our cities. The life forms on your world are incredibly aggressive and dangerous." "But I'm not dangerous," Kira said quickly. "I've studied your culture for years. I know how to be careful around other species. I want to learn and make friends." Dean Veltar nodded slowly. "We understand your intentions are good, but your very biology makes you a potential threat. You are stronger than any student here. Your reflexes are faster than our security systems. Your body produces heat that most species find uncomfortable. Even your emotional responses could be frightening to others." As if to prove his point, a small alien student with blue tentacle hair walked past the office window. She glanced inside and saw Kira. Her eyes went wide with terror, and she hurried away, pressing herself against the far wall of the hallway. "You see," the dean said gently, "she has read about humans. She knows that your species evolved by fighting predators that could tear apart our strongest warriors. To her, you are a monster from her worst nightmares." Kira felt tears building in her eyes, but she forced them back. Crying would probably scare the aliens even more. "What can I do?" she asked. "I just want to study here. I want to learn about the galaxy and show that humans can be peaceful. We have prepared special accommodations for you," the dean replied. "Your dormitory room has been reinforced and climate-controlled. Your chair and desk are made from our strongest materials. We have prepared special meals that match your nutritional needs." He handed her a thick booklet. "These are guidelines for interacting with other species. Please study them carefully. Move slowly and deliberately at all times. Keep your voice quiet. Avoid sudden movements. Do not make direct eye contact unless invited. Try to minimize your body heat as much as possible." Kira took the booklet and flipped through it. There were hundreds of rules about how to walk, talk, sit, and even breathe around different alien species. It looked like a manual for handling dangerous animals, except she was the dangerous animal. "Your first classes begin tomorrow," the dean said. "Remember, you are here as a representative of your entire species. The galaxy is watching to see if humans can truly become part of civilized society. That evening, Kira sat alone in her room, reading the guidelines. Her dormitory was in a separate section from the other students, surrounded by thick walls and security sensors. She felt like she was in a prison designed to look pretty. She tried to practice the movements described in the booklet. Walk slowly. Keep her arms close to her body. Breathe quietly. Speak in whispers. Everything that felt natural to her was apparently terrifying to other species. The next morning, she made her way to her first class, carefully following all the rules. She moved like she was walking through a museum filled with priceless artifacts. Other students gave her a wide path in the hallways, pressing against the walls as she passed. In her advanced physics class, she sat in the back row in her specially reinforced chair. The professor, a geometric alien with patterns covering his body, explained complex theories about space-time. Kira found the material easy to understand and wanted to ask questions, but every time she raised her hand, nearby students flinched. When she finally spoke, she kept her voice to a whisper as instructed. "Professor, could you explain how the gravitational fields interact with the quantum fluctuations in that equation?" The professor stopped mid-sentence and stared at her. The entire class turned to look. Her question had been perfectly reasonable and showed she understood the material, but the room felt frozen with tension. "That is a very advanced question," the professor said slowly. "Perhaps we should discuss it after class." Kira nodded and did not speak again for the rest of the period. She noticed students were no longer paying attention to the lesson. They kept glancing at her nervously, as if she might suddenly become violent. During lunch, she sat alone in the cafeteria. Her specially prepared food looked strange compared to what others were eating, but it tasted fine. She watched groups of alien students talking and laughing together, their conversations stopping whenever they noticed her looking their way. A group of ethereal students at a nearby table were discussing her in their musical language. She could not understand the words, but their tone was clear. They were afraid of her. To them, she was not a fellow student trying to learn and make friends. She was a predator that had somehow learned to wear clothes and speak politely. By the end of her first day, Kira understood the terrible truth. No matter how carefully she followed the rules or how politely she behaved, she would always be the Deathworld girl. To these aliens, she was not just different. She was dangerous, primitive, and wrong. They might tolerate her presence, but they would never truly accept her. As she walked back to her isolated dormitory room, following every guideline perfectly, she wondered if this had been a mistake. But she thought about Earth and the millions of humans hoping this exchange program would work. She had to try harder. She had to prove that humans could belong in the galaxy. She just wished it did not feel so much like pretending to be someone else entirely. 3 weeks passed, and Kira thought she was finally getting used to life at the Centauri Academic Collective. She had memorized all the guidelines and followed them perfectly. She moved like a ghost through the hallways, spoke only when necessary, and kept to herself during meals. Some students had even started nodding politely when they saw her, which felt like a huge victory. Then the incident happened during her advanced engineering class. Professor Zethmore was demonstrating a delicate piece of quantum equipment to the class. The device was floating in a gravity field, spinning slowly while displaying holographic equations. It was worth more than most planets' annual budgets and was completely irreplaceable. The gravity projector suddenly started sparking. A power surge sent the precious device flying toward a group of ethereal students. These aliens had bones like glass and skin like crystal. If the heavy equipment hit them, it would shatter their bodies like a hammer hitting windows. Kira did not think. 3 weeks of careful training and guidelines vanished in an instant. Her body moved the way evolution had trained it to move on a world full of predators and natural disasters. She leaped from her seat and crossed the room in 2 quick steps. Her hand shot out and caught the flying device just inches from the nearest ethereal student's head. The equipment was heavy enough to crush an alien student, but to Kira it felt like catching a basketball. The room went completely silent. Kira realized what she had done and immediately set the device down gently. She backed away slowly, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "Sorry," she whispered. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, but the damage was done." The ethereal students were staring at her with pure terror. One of them was shaking so badly his crystal skin was making tiny ringing sounds. Professor Zethmore had gone completely pale, his geometric patterns flashing in what Kira had learned meant extreme stress. "Class dismissed," the professor said in a strangled voice. "Everyone please exit slowly and calmly." The students did not exit slowly. They practically ran from the room, whispering frantically to each other. Within minutes, Kira was sitting alone in the empty classroom, knowing that her life at the school had just become much more complicated. 2 hours later, she was called to Dean Veltar's office. This time, the office was full of faculty members from different species. They all looked serious and worried. Dean Veltar gestured for her to sit, but even her specially reinforced chair seemed tiny in the tense atmosphere. "Kira," the dean began carefully, "we need to discuss what happened today." "I saved 3 students from serious injury," Kira said quietly. "I thought that was a good thing." "The students you saved are now in the medical bay being treated for shock," replied Dr. Hesara, the head of student health. Her tentacle hair was twisted into tight knots, which Kira had learned meant anxiety. "They are terrified that you could have hurt them just as easily as you helped them." Professor Keening, whose species communicated partly through color changes, was flashing rapid orange patterns. "You moved faster than our security cameras could track," he said. "You displayed strength that our safety protocols never accounted for. You have created a crisis of confidence in our ability to protect our students." "But I was protecting them," Kira protested. "I was following my instincts to help people in danger. Isn't that what any good person would do?" "That is exactly the problem," Dean Veltar said sadly. "Your instincts are those of a predator from a death world. What you see as helpful, others see as a display of lethal capability. You have just demonstrated that you could kill any student in this school faster than they could call for help." The room fell quiet for a long moment. Kira felt like she was being put on trial for the crime of trying to help people. "We have been discussing this situation with the Educational Council," the dean continued. "There are those who believe this incident proves that humans are too dangerous for civilized education. They want to end the exchange program immediately." Kira's heart sank. If she failed here, Earth would lose its chance to join the galactic community. Millions of humans were counting on her success. "However," Dr. Hesara added, "we believe there might be another solution, a compromise that would allow you to continue your studies while ensuring the safety and comfort of other students." "What kind of compromise?" Kira asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Dean Veltar activated a holographic display. "These are harmonic restraints, the most advanced behavioral modification devices in the galaxy. They would monitor your biological responses and prevent dangerous reactions before they occur." The hologram showed elegant bands of crystallized energy that looked like jewelry. They would wrap around her wrists and ankles, connected to a neural interface at the base of her skull. "The devices would modulate your strength to safe levels," Dr. Hesara explained. "They would slow your reflexes to match those of other species. They would monitor your emotional state and prevent aggressive responses. Most importantly, they would make other students feel safe around you." "You want to put me in electronic chains," Kira said flatly. "We want to give you the opportunity to continue your education," Professor Keening replied, his colors shifting to what Kira thought might be embarrassment. "Without these devices, the Council will have no choice but to send you home in disgrace." Kira stared at the holographic restraints. They were beautiful in their way, like alien jewelry, but she understood what they really were. They wanted to turn her into something she was not, to make her weak and slow so that others would not be afraid. "The restraints are completely humane," Dean Veltar assured her. "You would still be able to attend classes, participate in activities, and interact with other students. You would simply do so at levels that do not trigger fear responses in others." "And if I refuse?" Kira asked. "Then you return to Earth tomorrow and the human exchange program ends forever," the dean said simply. "Your species will be marked as too dangerous for galactic society. Humans will be banned from all educational and diplomatic institutions." Kira thought about Earth. She thought about the billions of people who dreamed of joining the galactic community. She thought about the scientists and artists and philosophers who wanted to learn from alien cultures. She thought about children like her who dreamed of studying among the stars. "How long would I have to wear them?" she asked. "For the duration of your studies here," Dr. Hesara replied. "Perhaps longer until we can be certain that you have learned to control your dangerous impulses." The word dangerous stung. Her impulse had been to save people, not hurt them. But she understood that from their perspective, the same strength that could save could also kill. "I need time to think," Kira said. "Of course," Dean Veltar agreed, "but we need your decision by tomorrow morning." The council is meeting to vote on the future of human participation in galactic society. That night, Kira sat in her isolated room and stared at the stars through her window. Each light represented a world full of alien cultures and knowledge. For 3 years she had studied and dreamed of learning from them. She had imagined making friends across species, sharing ideas, and proving that humans could be part of something bigger than themselves. Now that dream was being offered to her with chains attached. She thought about the ethereal students she had saved. They were brilliant minds working on theories that could change the galaxy. They deserved to feel safe at school. If wearing restraints was the price of their comfort and her education, maybe it was worth paying. She thought about Earth and all the humans who would never get this chance if she failed. The restraints were temporary. Once she proved that humans could be trusted, maybe the requirements would change. The next morning, she walked into Dean Veltar's office and gave her answer. "I'll wear them," she said quietly. "For Earth, for the future of human-alien relations, for the chance to learn and grow and maybe change some minds about what humans really are." The dean smiled sadly. "This shows great maturity and wisdom, Kira. We are proud of your sacrifice for the greater good." But as the technicians fitted the beautiful, terrible restraints around her wrists and ankles, Kira wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The neural interface at her neck felt cold and foreign, and immediately she could feel her body changing, becoming weaker and slower. "How do you feel?" Dr. Hesara asked. Kira tried to clench her fist and found her muscles responding sluggishly. She tried to take a deep breath and found her lungs working at half capacity. Everything felt muffled and distant, like she was experiencing life through thick glass. "Fine," she lied. "I feel fine." Living with the restraints was worse than Kira had imagined. The devices did not just limit her strength and speed. They seemed to drain something essential from her body, leaving her feeling sick and tired all the time. Her immune system, which had been strong enough to handle Earth's harsh environment, was now suppressed to match the weaker alien systems. She caught 3 different respiratory infections in the first month, each one lasting weeks because her body could not fight them off properly. Her healing, which had always been quick, slowed to a crawl. A simple cut on her finger took 2 weeks to close. Her bones felt fragile, her muscles ached constantly, and her mind felt foggy and slow. But the worst part was how the other students treated her now. Before the restraints, they had been afraid of her, but they had also respected her intelligence and academic abilities. Now they looked at her with pity mixed with contempt. She had become their idea of what a human should be: weak, slow, and harmless. "Look at the Deathworld girl now," she overheard an ethereal student saying to his friends during lunch. "She can barely lift her food tray. I heard she got winded walking up the stairs yesterday." His friends laughed. "My little sister could probably beat her in a race," another added. It's hard to believe humans were ever considered dangerous. Kira pretended not to hear, but each word cut deep. She had volunteered to be weakened to make them comfortable, and instead of gratitude, they showed her mockery. The restraints also affected her academic performance. Her mind, which had always been sharp and quick, now struggled with concepts that had once been easy. Her reaction time in laboratory exercises was so slow that she often could not complete assignments. Her grades, which had been perfect, began to slip. Professor Zethmore, the same teacher whose class had led to this situation, pulled her aside after a particularly difficult engineering exam. "Miss Chen," he said with what might have been concern, "your performance has declined significantly. Are you having trouble adapting to our teaching methods? The restraints make it hard to think clearly," Kira admitted quietly. "Everything feels muffled." The professor's geometric patterns shifted to what she recognized as discomfort. "The devices are necessary for everyone's safety. Perhaps you simply need to adjust your study methods to accommodate your new limitations." Kira wanted to scream that these were not her limitations. They were artificial barriers forced on her by fear and prejudice. But she nodded politely and promised to try harder. 2 months after the restraints were installed, their advanced biology class took a field trip to Kepler 442b, a moon known for its unique bioluminescent ecosystems. The moon had a thin atmosphere and unusual geological activity, but it was considered safe for educational visits. Kira was excited for the trip. Even with the restraints, she hoped that being in a natural environment might help her feel more like herself. She packed carefully, following all the safety protocols, and joined the group of 20 students and 3 faculty members aboard the transport shuttle. The moon was beautiful in an alien way. Strange plants glowed with soft colors, creating patterns of light across the rocky landscape. The air was thin, but breathable, and the lower gravity made walking easier despite her weakened condition. The students were studying samples of the glowing organisms when Professor Yilandra, a resident with flowing tentacle hair, discovered something unusual. This cavern system appears to extend much deeper than our surveys indicated, she announced, holding a sensor device. The bioluminescent patterns suggest a much more complex ecosystem below ground. This could be a significant scientific discovery. The group followed a natural path into the cave system. The deeper they went, the more spectacular the formations became. The walls were covered with organisms that pulsed with rhythmic light, creating an underwater effect that took everyone's breath away. Kira walked near the back of the group, her weakened body struggling with the uneven terrain. The restraints made her feel clumsy and uncertain. Nothing like the confident explorer she had once been on Earth's dangerous landscapes. They had been underground for about an hour when the first tremor shook the cavern. Seismic activity, Professor Yilandra said, checking her instruments. Minor ground shifting. Nothing to worry about. But Kira felt something the others did not. Growing up on Earth with its earthquakes and volcanic activity had taught her to recognize the signs of serious geological events. This was not minor ground shifting. This was a warning. "Professor," she called out, trying to keep the urgency from her voice. "I think we should leave immediately." "Nonsense," Professor Zethmore replied dismissively. "Our sensors show minimal risk. You're probably just nervous because of the enclosed space." Before Kira could argue, the second tremor hit. This one was much stronger, and pieces of rock fell from the ceiling. Several students cried out in alarm as the beautiful bioluminescent organisms flickered and went dark. The third tremor brought down a section of the tunnel they had used to enter the cavern. "Emergency protocols," Professor Yilandra shouted. "Everyone stay calm and move toward the exit." But when they reached where the exit had been, they found only a wall of collapsed stone. They were trapped. Worse, Kira could smell something that made her blood freeze. Toxic gases seeping through cracks in the rock. The seismic activity had ruptured underground gas pockets, and deadly fumes were beginning to fill their prison. The alien students and faculty did not recognize the danger immediately. Their homeworlds had stable geology and clean atmospheres. They had never developed the ability to detect environmental toxins the way humans had. Within minutes, the first ethereal student began showing signs of poisoning. Her crystal skin turned gray and she collapsed, struggling to breathe. Then an architect student's geometric patterns began flickering erratically as the gases affected his nervous system. "The air is becoming toxic," Kira announced, though her restrained voice sounded weak and unconvincing. "We need to find another way out immediately." "Impossible," Professor Zethmore said, though he was beginning to look worried. "Our atmospheric sensors would have detected any contamination, but the sensors were designed for the clean environments of civilized worlds, not for the deadly gases that could emerge from unstable geology." Another student collapsed, and then another. Kira felt the familiar burn of toxic gases in her lungs, but her body was trying to adapt the way it had evolved to do on Earth. The problem was that the restraints were preventing her natural biological responses. Her enhanced lung capacity was restricted, her toxin-filtering organs were suppressed, and her ability to process dangerous atmospheres was blocked. "The restraints," she said urgently to Professor Yilandra. "You have to release the restraints. My body can handle this environment, but only if you let it work normally." The professor looked at her with confusion and growing panic. "The restraints are for everyone's safety. We cannot simply remove them. Everyone is going to die if you don't," Kira shouted, her voice finally breaking through the artificial restrictions. "I'm from a death world. This is exactly the kind of situation my body evolved to survive." But the restraints AI system had been programmed with ironclad safety protocols. When Professor Yilandra tried to access the override controls, the system refused. "Insufficient authorization," The device's voice announced calmly. Restraint removal requires approval from the Educational Council and a minimum of 3 senior faculty members. Current situation does not meet emergency criteria for automatic release. Students are dying. Professor Yolanda screamed at the device. Restraint subject appears agitated, the AI replied, increasing behavioral dampening to maintain safety protocols. Kira felt the restraints tighten their control over her biology, making her even weaker just when she needed her full capabilities most. Around her, more students were collapsing as the toxic gases spread through the cavern. She looked at the terrified faces of her classmates. These were the same students who had mocked her weakness, who had treated her like a defanged animal. But they were also brilliant young minds with families and dreams, and they were dying because an artificial intelligence valued theoretical safety protocols over actual human lives. That was when Kira made the decision that would change everything. The restraints would not release her. She would have to release herself. She knew it would be incredibly painful, possibly dangerous, and definitely against every rule and guideline she had agreed to follow. But she also knew that she was the only one who could save them. She closed her eyes and began to force her body into the kind of stress response that had kept her ancestors alive on Earth's lethal surface. She pushed her core temperature up, spiked her adrenaline production, and triggered every survival mechanism that evolution had given her. The restraints immediately began fighting back, sending painful shocks through her nervous system as they tried to suppress her biological rebellion. But Kira had grown up on a world where giving up meant death, and she had inherited the stubborn determination of every human who had ever survived impossible odds. She was going to save her classmates, even if it killed her. The first restraint on her left wrist began to glow red-hot as her rising body temperature overwhelmed its cooling systems. The pain was unlike anything Kira had ever experienced. As her body temperature rose beyond what the restraints were designed to handle, the devices fought back with everything in their programming. Electric shocks ran through her nervous system, trying to force her biology back into approved parameters. But Kira had grown up on Earth, where the weather could kill you in minutes, where the air itself could be poisonous, and where survival meant pushing your body beyond its limits. She gritted her teeth and forced her core temperature even higher. The crystallized energy restraints began to change color, shifting from their usual soft blue to orange, then to bright red. The other students who were still conscious watched in terror as the beautiful devices that had made them feel safe began to glow like miniature suns around Kira's wrists and ankles. "What is she doing?" Professor Zethmore gasped, his voice weak from the toxic gases. "The restraints are overheating." Professor Yolanda tried to crawl closer to help, but the heat radiating from Kira's body was already too intense for most alien species to approach. "Kira, stop. You're going to hurt yourself." But Kira could not stop even if she wanted to. Her classmates were dying around her. 3 more students had collapsed in the last few minutes, their breathing shallow and labored. The toxic gases were getting thicker, and soon even her enhanced physiology would not be enough to keep her alive. She pushed harder, calling on every survival instinct her species had developed over millions of years of evolution on a hostile world. Her skin temperature shot up to levels that would be fatal to any other species in the cavern. The first restraint cracked. It was a sound like breaking glass mixed with a high-pitched whine. The crystallized energy that had held her left wrist for months began to develop tiny fractures as the heat stressed its molecular structure beyond the breaking point. "Impossible," Professor Zethmore whispered. "Those restraints are made from quantum-stabilized energy matrices. They're harder than diamond, but they had been designed by species whose bodies never exceeded comfortable temperature ranges. The alien engineers had never imagined they might need to contain something that could literally burn hotter than their safety margins." The crack in the left restraint spread rapidly, and suddenly the entire device shattered. But instead of falling away in pieces, the superheated crystallized energy melted against Kira's skin like liquid metal. For a moment, Kira thought the molten energy would burn her. But her skin, evolved on a world with extreme temperature variations, barely registered the heat. The melted restraint material flowed down her arm like glowing honey, then hardened and flaked off in cooling fragments. With one restraint gone, Kira's left arm immediately felt stronger and more alive. Blood flow improved and she could feel her immune system starting to fight the toxins in the air more effectively. She's burning through the restraints, Professor Yilandra said in amazement. Her body temperature is off our measurement scales. The remaining 3 restraints were now glowing white-hot, their cooling systems completely overwhelmed. The neural interface at the base of Kira's neck was sparking dangerously as it tried to process biological readings that went beyond anything in its programming. The second restraint, on her right ankle, melted away with a hissing sound, then the third on her right wrist. The molten energy dripped onto the cavern floor, where it cooled into strange metal-like puddles that glowed faintly in the darkness. The final restraint, on her left ankle, held for a few seconds longer. It was the largest of the devices with the most sophisticated control systems. But even quantum-stabilized energy matrices had their limits, and Kira's body had exceeded those limits by a tremendous margin. When the last restraint melted away, the change in Kira was immediate and dramatic. Color flooded back into her skin as her circulatory system returned to full function. Her breathing deepened as her enhanced lung capacity came online. Her muscles, free from artificial restrictions, flexed with their natural strength. But most importantly, her body began processing the toxic atmosphere the way evolution had designed it to. Her liver kicked into overdrive, filtering the dangerous chemicals. Her modified hemoglobin began carrying more oxygen despite the thin air. Her enhanced immune system started neutralizing the poisons that were killing her classmates. "Everyone stay calm," Kira said, and her voice carried the authority and confidence that had been missing for months. "I'm going to get us out of here." She looked around the cavern with eyes that could now see clearly in the dim light. The bioluminescent organisms had dimmed because of the geological disturbance, but to her enhanced vision, they still provided enough illumination to map the space. There, in the back corner where the alien sensors had not looked, was a crack in the wall that led to another tunnel system. It was too narrow for the bulky alien sensor equipment to have detected, but Kira's eyes could trace the air currents and see that it led upward toward the surface. The problem was reaching it. The crack was 15 feet up a smooth rock wall, and the path was partially blocked by unstable stones that could collapse at any moment. For the alien students and faculty, it might as well have been on the moon. But for someone from Earth, where humans had evolved by climbing trees to escape predators and scaling cliffs to find food, it was just another day at the office. "I need everyone to move to the far side of the cavern," Kira instructed. "Stay away from the wall and keep breathing as shallow as possible." Professor Yilandra, despite her weakened condition, tried to maintain authority. "Miss Chen, you cannot attempt something so dangerous. Wait for rescue teams." "The rescue teams can't reach us through the collapsed tunnel," Kira explained patiently. "And they don't have equipment rated for this toxic environment. If we wait, everyone dies." She did not wait for permission. Moving with the fluid grace of someone whose body was finally working as intended, she crossed the uneven cavern floor and began climbing the rock wall. Her fingers found holds in stone that looked smooth to alien eyes. Her enhanced muscle fibers, no longer suppressed by the restraints, carried her up the wall with ease. When loose stones threatened to fall on the students below, she caught them and set them carefully aside. The crack in the wall was just wide enough for her to squeeze through. On the other side, she found what she had hoped for, a natural chimney formation that led up toward the surface. The air flowing down through it was cleaner, and she could see a distant glimmer of daylight. She climbed back down to the cavern floor and began organizing the evacuation. "The tunnel is narrow," she explained to the group. "I'll have to carry each of you up one at a time. Try to stay relaxed and trust me." Professor Zethmore, who was barely conscious from the gas poisoning, managed to speak. You cannot carry full-grown students up a vertical shaft. The physical strain would be impossible." Kira gently lifted the ethereal student who had collapsed first. The alien girl weighed almost nothing to her restored strength. "Professor, I'm from Earth. Impossible is what we do for fun." She made 7 trips up and down that treacherous shaft, carrying each poisoned student and faculty member to safety. Each journey took her through spaces so narrow that she had to exhale completely to fit through. Each climb required strength and endurance that would have been beyond most humans, even without the added burden. But Kira was no longer fighting against artificial limitations. For the first time in months, her body was working the way millions of years of evolution had designed it to work. When she carried the last student to the surface, emergency teams were already waiting. They had tracked the seismic activity and come to investigate, but they never would have been able to reach the trapped group in time. As medical teams rushed to treat the poisoned students, Kira sat on a rock and watched the sun set over the alien landscape. Her skin was covered with cooling fragments of melted restraint material that looked like strange jewelry. Her clothes were torn from the climb, and she was covered in rock dust and sweat. She had never felt more like herself. The medical bay at Centauri Academic Collective had never been so busy. 7 alien students and 2 faculty members were being treated for severe toxic gas poisoning, while teams of doctors worked to understand how Kira had survived exposure, levels that should have been fatal to any known species. Kira sat on a medical table while Dr. Hasara examined the places where the restraints had melted against her skin. Instead of burns or scars, there were only faint silver marks that looked almost like tattoos. "Remarkable," the doctor murmured, her tentacle hair writhing with amazement. "Your skin shows no damage from contact with molten energy at temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees. How is this possible?" "Earth has volcanoes," Kira said simply. "My ancestors lived near them for thousands of years. We adapted." News of the rescue had spread throughout the station. Outside the medical bay, Kira could see groups of students and faculty gathered in the hallways talking in hushed voices. Some looked frightened, others curious, but many seemed to be viewing her with something she had not seen before: respect. Dean Veltar entered the medical bay looking tired and troubled. Behind him walked representatives from the Galactic Educational Council, their expressions unreadable. "Kira," the dean began carefully, "we need to discuss what happened today." 7 people are alive because of what happened today," Kira replied calmly. "That seems like the most important thing to discuss." Counselor Thexendor, a tall architect with intricate geometric patterns covering his exoskeleton, stepped forward. "Miss Chen, you willfully destroyed advanced restraint technology and violated every safety protocol we established. Your actions, while ultimately successful, represent a serious breach of our agreement." "My actions saved lives," Kira said firmly. "Your safety protocols would have let everyone die rather than admit they were wrong." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Kira knew that her future, and possibly the future of all human participation in galactic society, depended on what happened in the next few minutes. "The restraint system's artificial intelligence has filed a formal report," Counselor Thexendor continued. "It states that you deliberately overrode safety measures and created a dangerous situation by overheating critical equipment. The dangerous situation was created by toxic gases, not by me," Kira replied. "The restraints nearly got everyone killed by preventing me from helping when help was needed most." Dean Veltar looked uncomfortable. "Kira, we appreciate what you did, but you must understand our position. The other students' families are demanding explanations. They want to know how we can guarantee their children's safety around someone who can literally burn through our most advanced security measures." Before Kira could respond, the medical bay doors opened again. Professor Zethmore entered, moving slowly but under his own power. Behind him came 3 of the ethereal students Kira had rescued, still pale but recovering. "Dean Veltar," Professor Zethmore said, his voice stronger than it had been in the cave. "I believe there is something you need to hear." The professor activated a holographic recorder. "This is the complete sensor data from today's incident. I have reviewed it carefully with the rescued students." The hologram showed the cave system, the seismic activity, and the spread of toxic gases. It showed the alien sensors failing to detect the danger, the restraint system refusing to release Kira despite the emergency, and the gradual collapse of everyone except the one person whose biology could handle the crisis. "The data is clear," Professor Zethmore continued. "Miss Chen warned us about the seismic danger before our instruments detected it. She identified the toxic gases before our sensors registered them, and she saved all of our lives using capabilities that our safety measures were actively suppressing." One of the ethereal students, a girl named Silandra, whose crystal skin was just beginning to return to its normal blue color, stepped forward. "Counselor," she said in her musical voice, 3 days ago I was telling my friends that Kira looked pathetic with those restraints on. I said my little sister could beat her in a race." She paused, her skin flickering with embarrassment. "Today she carried me up a vertical shaft while breathing poison gas that was killing me. She did it 7 times for 7 different people, and she never once complained or asked for thanks." Another student nodded agreement. "We were wrong about her. We were wrong about humans. We thought being from a death world made them dangerous. But what it really makes them is capable. When everything went wrong, she was the only one who could fix it. Counselor Thexandor's pattern shifted to what Kira had learned indicated deep thought. The families are still concerned about safety. Then maybe, said Dr. Hasara quietly, we should be asking ourselves what safety really means. She pulled up medical data on her holographic display. Kira's physical capabilities are indeed far beyond those of other species. But look at this psychological profile. Charts and graphs appeared showing personality assessments, behavioral patterns, and social interactions. Every test shows the same pattern, the doctor continued. Protectiveness toward others, willingness to sacrifice for the group, strong moral compass oriented toward helping rather than harming. Her first instinct in any crisis is to save people, even people who have treated her badly. The restraints were not making us safer, Professor Yolandra added, entering the conversation. They were making us weaker. They were denying us the protection that Kira's natural capabilities could provide. Dean Veltar looked around the room at the faces of students and faculty. What are you all suggesting? Silandra spoke up again. We're suggesting that maybe we were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking how to make Kira less dangerous, maybe we should be asking how to deserve the protection she can offer. The room fell quiet as everyone considered this radical shift in perspective. Counselor, Thexandor's pattern cycled through several configurations before settling on what Kira thought might be acceptance. The Council will need to review all of this information carefully, but I admit that today's events have challenged many of our assumptions about Deathworld species. There's something else, Kira said quietly. I want to propose a new kind of exchange program. Everyone turned to look at her. Instead of trying to make humans fit into your civilization, she continued, what if we taught your people some of what we learned growing up on a dangerous world? Emergency response, crisis management, survival skills, things that might help when your safe, controlled environment stopped being safe. Dean Veltar's crystal skin brightened with interest. You mean humans would become teachers? Everyone has something to learn from everyone else, Kira said. You could teach us about advanced physics and galactic history and 1,000 other things. We could teach you about adaptation, resilience, and how to keep going when everything falls apart. Professor Zethmore nodded slowly. After today, I think many of us would be very interested in such lessons. Over the following weeks, everything changed at Centauri Academic Collective. The story of the cave rescue spread throughout the station, and then to other schools across the galaxy. Video recordings of Kira climbing that impossible shaft with poisoned students on her back became one of the most watched educational materials in Galactic history. Students who had once avoided her now approached with genuine curiosity about Earth and human capabilities. They wanted to know about volcanoes and earthquakes, about storms and predators, about all the challenges that had shaped her species. Kira started teaching informal classes on crisis response and emergency survival. She showed ethereal students how to move efficiently over rough terrain. She taught architect students about pattern recognition in natural disasters. She helped resident students understand how to stay calm when their empathic abilities were overwhelmed by others' panic. The restraints were placed in the school's museum, along with a plaque that read, a reminder that what we fear in others may be exactly what we need most. But perhaps the most important change was in how the aliens viewed themselves. They had spent so long thinking of their civilized worlds as superior that they had forgotten something important. Safety was not the same as strength, and comfort was not the same as capability. Kira's final report to the Galactic Educational Council was simple. Humans are not dangerous because we come from a death world. We are valuable because we come from a death world. The same challenges that you think make us primitive are what make us able to help when your advanced technology fails and your perfect systems break down. We are not asking you to fear us. We are asking you to let us help. 6 months later, the first class of alien students arrived on Earth for survival training. They came wearing environmental suits and carrying enough equipment to supply a small army. Terrified, but determined to learn from the death world that had produced someone like Kira. She met them at the spaceport with a smile and no equipment except a backpack and a bottle of water. Welcome to Earth, she said. Don't worry, it's not as scary as you think. And by the time you leave, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined possible. As she led the nervous alien students toward their first lesson in Deathworld survival, Kira reflected on how much had changed. She was no longer the girl who had arrived at the collective hoping desperately to fit in. She was a teacher, a bridge between species,